Trekland HQ, and we're live. Here comes the writer's strike, Star Trek, episode 306 of Trekland Tuesdays Live. You know, boom. With me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemeczek, coming to you from the heart of Trekland and Trekland Treks through the portal 47, for some sanity, clarity, and the big picture in things Star Trek. And maybe those words are going to ring a little truer today than normal. We have all kinds of tones here on the show, and today we may be getting into the weeds a little bit. So buckle up. It's good to see everybody. Thank you for being here for another Tuesday. Yes, I've been hanging on here to try to get some feedback and some homework and some up-to-date what's going on, but we very much are on day one of the first writer's strike in 15 years, which if you say it like that, it's more cyclical. I've just been kind of, bear with me. Hey, and you know what? If you are new to Trekland Tuesdays Live, welcome. It's always a fun time. You got to check out our chat, folks. Pull up the chat window if you haven't. That's part of the experience. We've got great folks from around the world, I may add. That's why I do it at this time, so we can have as many Europeans and sure, Aussies and, maybe even East Asia if we could. The rest of the world, I think, is in dark, but we have a great time here, and it's good for having a global perspective. So I really appreciate our chat. A lot of our chat folks are, they were veterans of our Life Support Live. They're lifers. Some of them are Portal 47ers. Our Portales are here, and a lot of folks are just from my World of Trekland and on my mail list. But I appreciate everybody being here at this time on Tuesdays, and it's a momentous Tuesday. And just remember, when you're in the chat, hey, introduce yourself, say where you're from. Give us the weather, give us the language lesson, whatever. But just remember that if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe here, and Twitch, you will see all the comments. If you're on Facebook, thanks to Facebook, you're only going to see the Facebook comments in my Restream aggregator, okay? So buckle up. And here's the thing. We got a good topic today, and then I'll take a short break. We'll look at what we can of Parrot Analytics and other ratings currently. And then I will dive back. I will scroll back and dive into the chat here, and we'll talk. All righty? All righty, Pooh. And I have got we're starting a little late, but I've got a hard out in 2 hours. So let's dive into it, because writer's strike. I've been saying I felt guilty the last month or so because you could see this building and looming, and the rest of the world was consumed with the headlines of the day. Trek world was consumed with loving Picard, or the 2% that didn't. I'm not talking about critiquing. I'm talking about it just didn't. But no, we've been distracted, and it's been a good distraction. But I've felt a little guilty that we weren't, prepping the world or prepping you all to think about the strike. And well, here it sits. A month ago, I checked in with a couple of Star Trek writers who didn't think it was going to happen. One word was nah, from a Star Trek writer who's been getting a lot of well-deserved attention, I should say. But here it is, and as it got down to the wire, it's not. Now, for the rest of the world, for one thing, I cannot believe it's been 15 years since the last strike. And, the strike is not inevitable. They have contracts. The Writers Guild has a contract for a certain amount of years with the producers, as do the directors, the WGA, as do the actors, SAG, and IATSE even, which is all the guild's backstage creative folk of all different kinds. It's the International Association of Theater and Scenic Employees, I think, or Theatrical and Stage Employees, which covers a lot of ground. The Art Directors Guild is in that group. Anyway, it's a lot of fields. But they tend to be, especially SAG directors and writers, all tend to be timed to the same year. And one of them typically goes forward. And just as it was in 2007, it's the writers. They're the canary in the coal mine. All the unions, as is happening right now, all honor each other's strikes and work actions. And you typically think of, well, writers doing their jobs first, and then the directors, and then the actors, and then, and all along you've got pre and post people. But nobody wants to, because what one does affects everybody. And in the old days, that might be, oh, what are the prices we're paying? What are the benefits? What's the contributions to the pension and the health fund and all of that? And one of the last bastions of labor sanity and stability has been Hollywood, even though the rest of the world might look at it as this bunch of elitists. And the worst thing you could do is look at, say, the Actors Guild and think they're all Tom Cruises, or they're all, pick your favorite megastar now. No, that's the upper 1 or 2%. The journeyman working actor is just trying to get, TV gigs, movie gigs, those faces you love to pick out, who occasionally get a lucky break and get to show their stuff and rise up. But most working actors are journeyman actors. It's a little bit the same way with directors, and the Directors Guild includes first ADs and second ADs too, but it's really that way with writers. You've got the run all the way from writer producers who still write and still maintain can be Writers Guild members, all the way through climbing the ladder writers to the entrant level writers who are just trying to scrap, who are still writing one-off scripts. And we're really looking at a unified, they're split, but the Writers Guild East, which is theatrical in a lot of ways, concerning, but still there's a lot of TV and movies shot out East. They just live there. This is all a thing united. Now I'm going to be dipping into the board here. So what do we know? The contract expired on May 1st. They sat down for their negotiations like usual the last few months, got to an impasse on most items. A month ago, you may have seen this, there was like a 89% turnout with a 98% yes vote to authorize a strike, leaving their leadership to do that. And that's seen, not, they didn't want to go on strike, but that's seen as, here's how that's a variable to say, here's how united we are. Because if the producers see a low, apathetic turnout or not, they go, we can divide and conquer here in a labor negotiation. So being very public and saying, here's what the vote was, it was like, well, okay, we know that the writers are pretty united here. And did not happen. Now, what's happened the last 2 or 3 days, there's been kind of a massive education catch-up campaign. And, I'm going to pivot this back to Star Trek, the 07, which I can't believe. And we just did some memory bits about it over the holidays, because it wasn't all about Star Trek, but there was a Star Trek star moment there where one of the things that emerged, the 07 strike was the first one to happen in social media days. Because sometimes there's the threat of a strike and then there's a settlement. And sometimes the union backs down. Sometimes there's just a few demands they want changes. When a contract expires and they look at it and go, okay, well, here's what needs to change. Well, sometimes when things are slower or not as, socially upheavalistic, when there's not so much, change and transition going, things are in flux, things are calmer. Times in the 50s, 60s, 70s were that way. Now, famously, we know about the writer's strike from 87 because it affected Star Trek The Next Generation. That's why we only got 20 episodes in the second season. That's why We'll Always Have Paris, which I start off thinking about Janice and Picard, but it winds up being Data and the bucket on a rod. In the Mannheim Effect. I'll never forget Rob Legato, visual effects director, telling me, visual effects producer, first season, telling me how they were able to finish the show and not cross the picket line because they were brainstorming what a line might. Anyway, they had to do posts and it was after the fact. And, there's a common mistake that people think the writer's strike happened at the end of season 2. And that's why Maury Hurley left. And that's why we got Shades of Grey, the clip show. It was a year earlier. It was a year earlier. It had nothing to do with the end of second season. So yeah, writer strikes have woven in and out of Star Trek and been part of it. And of course, the 07-08 strike we were in the fallow days. Although Bob Orci and Alex Kurtzman were at Paramount working on the script for Star Trek '09 as it was being shot. They were doing their writer hats, but they honored the strike completely and made no changes. Maybe that could have helped. Made no changes in the script while they were shooting it. And the 07-08 strike, I mean, the one in 87 was largely seen as a failure, like it was very disruptive and didn't accomplish all that much. But the 07-08 was a watershed, both because it was, along with the social media era, it was the creeping dawn of new media. And it was a time when producers were looking at little web promotional pieces. I mean, not just, hello, I'm so-and-so on. I mean, scenes, dramatic little scenes pulled out special, written separately from episodes to advertise shows. And it was just seen as promotion, not real writing. And writers were saying, no, you can't ask us because it's a slippery slope and where will this end? And there were a whole host of issues. But the biggest thing was, even as we were just having the dawn of the prestige Netflix not Game of Thrones, The Sopranos, and Lost was revolutionizing serial TV, getting, it was a very transitory time there, transitional time. And the Writers Guild sensed it. And it was, again, a ripple effect that was going to affect the directors and that arena and the actors. And then secondarily, the IATSE folk, the crews, creative staffs and crews. And once again, then it was the writers that went first. And they championed not looking at things as blow off. That, I mean, among the many issues they tackled and won on was this treatment of, no, there is no blow off writing. And as we adapt to new media, you're going to treat new media the same way we do now. Now, what's happened since then? Well, what happened that year also, the big turning point. And it was great because it was the last thing the old Star Trek.com covered as a news story with our team here in LA was the strike. And then a week later we were gone. And folks said, maybe it was us covering the strike. No, it had nothing to do with it. It was the bean counters in a time of huge transition and uproot with the Viacom divorce having happened. But in that time of disruption, it was the first social media strike, and basically the Guild, with the world starting to rise up and see what was going on. And just think, the election of Barack Obama was later that year. So it was a very interesting time, but the Guild got the public on their side. They explained what was going on. They made it look very easy, that this is about fairness, that these were not elitists living in their ivory tower castles that average Joe and John and Mary couldn't relate to. They made it about working writers trying to have a wage, and basically about fairness and being taken advantage of, as the upper 1%, 2% were taking advantage. They got the public on their side, which added even more to their own unity. It lasted 100 days. It went through the last couple of months of 07 and into 08, but it was pretty successful. It was a success. It was much better than the last major strike. It was not a fizzle. And here we go. We had contracts come up, I think, midway a few years ago. We've had renewal since then, but here we're at the time, and now we're at another one of those pivot times. And I think it's going to be dawning very quickly on folks, if they do half the job of communicating that they did last time, except it needs to happen very quickly, and it's already happening, that this is also about fairness. But like everything else the last few years, whatever you used to think the parameters were, well, it's on steroids now. It's on steroids now. And it's led by, as you may guessed, the revolution in how you see shows. Yeah, we've got Abbott Elementary and her sister comedies and 1-hour dramas on network are still out there. But what's the bulk of what you watch? What's the bulk of what gets ink and buzz? What turns up on the Parrot Analytics every week? What wins the Emmys? We're talking here mostly TV. These issues are mostly going to be affecting the TV side of things. Although features in the streaming world are going to apply too. But, for years, I grew up reading The Making of Star Trek that talked about TV in the 60s. the 80s and the syndication revolution was something that Next Gen pioneered, and syndication writers got paid a little less than Prestige Network. Wasn't fair, but that's what it was. And we've had this okay, now we've gone to Netflix with the premium channel revolution. And now we've got streaming, and we tend to think about streaming as being all about the serialized storytelling. It's also about these short seasons. Oh, well, that's what the BBC's done for years. Oh, well, I mean, they have a completely different structure. People are still paying license fees for their TV to the BBC because that's the British media model. So no, short streams have led to less exhausted writers' rooms and crews. You're doing 10 instead of 26 or 12, maybe 13. Now it's standardizing into 10, maybe even 8. Okay. But what that means is it's totally disrupted the model that people got paid by. Imagine if you went from a 40-hour work week to a 20-hour work week. And yay, okay. But you're an hourly employee. Now, that may sound simplistic when you think of, ooh, Hollywood, but it's the truth. That's at the core of what's going on. It's not only that. There's all kinds of evolutions that have occurred that I'm catching up on that have happened with the, not the serialized era, but the streaming short season era. There's this thing called the mini rooms in the old days. Okay, imagine this was your downtown industry, right? In the old days, if you wanted to be a writer and your dream, just like Gene's was, Gene Roddenberry in the 60s and 70s, when the market was much huger for freelance script writing, because a show would have a showrunner and maybe an assistant writer, and everything was freelance. There was no room. The room was the two people having a meeting with somebody. That's the way Gene wrote for Have Gun. That's the way they wrote for the original series Star Trek. It wasn't until the coming of the 80s, and oh my gosh, now we've got staffs of 7, 6, 8 people, and you're still taking freelance scripts. And the writer staff is still writing 1 or 2 or 3 even a year, but they're also doing rewrites on, okay, there's that. That's been all documented. Documented as in happy birthday yesterday for the red edition of the companion. That was a lot of fun on socials. But that model's gone. Now, we laugh about all the executive producers listed in the opening titles. Well, some of those EPs, they're writer producers, and some of them are producer producers. And some of them are graduated actor producers, actually, when they take that much of a role in the content of the show. And when you've gone from 26 down to 10, that's a focal thing, sure. But writers, it's not just a matter of you can't write for one show and make a living. And again, we're not talking about the upper end writers. We're not talking about the glamours or the stars. We're talking about the journeyman worker writers. Every week, even watching Star Trek, you're seeing new names bubble up, which is cool, which is good. You watch all shows and you see the new names coming along that you don't know already. And that's the turnover. That's the growth of the industry. That's new writers getting a job. Happens with actors, and lesser extent, of course, it's happening everywhere. It's happening in any industry that happens. It's just that we're very public with credits in media that way. But the world of coming to LA, or even sitting at home wherever you are and Zooming, but yeah, you need some FaceTime, making your mark, getting your foot in the door, pitching, all those kinds of things, the way the thing is put together. People, I've seen some smart folks tweeting about this recently, because you can look at charts. If you just want to look at the money issue of this, basically it's the structure people are saying basically you're making Hollywood the way it's settled because it's blown up. The old residual system that kept you sustained either between jobs, or maybe you were climbing the ladder to go from a low writer to a mid-level staff writer to co-producer, co-executive producer. Well, now when you get that high, now you're out and you're pitching your own shows and getting respect. And now you can see your own ideas put, and yes, make more money, but now you can turn around and you can hire younger writers. All of that's been blowing up as more and more of the shows we watch aren't old 20, 22, 26 episode model network shows with commercials. As that model has blown up, so has the reality of what a world is like for a book. The Writers Guild is basically saying it's made it where unless you come from an independently wealthy family and you want to start writing, you can't afford to be a journeyman writer working your butt off and expect to get rewarded. You sell a story, you sell a script, you have a few more scripts. If you make some contacts and networks, eventually maybe you get into your foot's in the door for a writer's room. It's all up and down the line. This use of, have you heard about this use of mini rooms where someone gets to pitch a story to a Netflix or an Amazon or one of the streaming channels, and they want you to develop it first? They want you to go hire or ask writers to work for nothing with promise of future payment on that's a mini room. And the people you brought in to work on it aren't get paid, or you're paying out of your own pocket. And then let's say it gets picked up, and then the streaming network channel is under no obligation to even keep on the people that you had helping you develop the show. It's nuts. It's nuts. People put their time in helping develop this, thinking they're going to get to work on it and be creative and also get paid for their work, and they're out in the cold. It's insane. That's one of the bugaboos. Basically, what the big picture here is the Writers Guild is saying, and with the actors and with the directors and all the creative guilds watching on, is saying that the shift in how studios are owned, stop me if you've heard this before, the way it's become all stock driven and growth driven. It's not enough for shows to be either successes or failures, and failures happen. And sometimes shows that just aren't as mega popular as other shows. That's happened. It's the dawn of time. That's the evolutionary system at work. That's survival of the fittest. That's the capitalist system. But the success ratio, the reward system isn't about successes and failures. It's about overall growth of the umbrella of the. I know I don't mean the Law and Order franchise or the Star Trek franchise. It's the studios, and more of the studios are corporately owned and have big, fat CEOs at the top. There's an amazing. Watch your socials. So here's one from the AFL-CIO in support of the WGA. Last year, 8 major Hollywood studio CEOs made over $773 million in annual salary. That's 8. And it's broken down here. I'm looking at it. Look for this. Many of the writers who write their shows can't afford rent, or they've got to hustle and write for 2 different shows to fill out the year, or just the structure of how payments are. Because it used to be, I make fun of it, but our one story sale shared with 6 people, right? What became Prophecy on Voyager. Once a quarter, we get a $9 check, which is hysterical. We're split. We get, $12, $15, $18, $20 check for that one of Voyager. Not Next Gen, not the original series, but Voyager, which is fun. Now, if we'd been full-time writers, that of course would have multiplied. That's also what allows writers to take risks and go off on a chase and try to develop shows and try to do that. But it's also what sustains the working writer. Well, if you blow up, if your 26 slot season comes down to 10, then that's fine. Whoa, you say there's more than 4 networks now. There's all these networks. Yeah, but they're all 10 item shows. They're all 10 slot shows or less. There's no avenue for the freelancers, for the new writers to come in and get there. There's lots more stress, lots more pressure. Those who can survive that initial culling period, a lot of people can't hack it. A lot of creative voices, the diversity that we're all screaming and craving for, those folks can't get in the door that way. But it's not just about that. There's an amazing fact here. I'm trying to find it. I'm watching that, like, every demand to fund every demand this year, which is basically trying to refigure the way the payment system and credits and residuals and all that is worked, matches a streaming model, not the dying old dinosaur network model. That's what this is all about. They've got to say, oh, look, things have evolved. Okay, fine. We'll match the whole model of how we work to that. because the thing we were hitched to before, sure, it lasted 30, 40. Well, there were no residuals in the 50s. Thank you, Lucy and Desi. There were no reruns. So that was an evolutionary change. So the model we've had since the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, aughts has blown up. It's no longer relevant. It's what, 20% of what you see that's out there? I've been watching some threads from John Rogers, from Albert Kim, from Joe Keohane, who his thread is talking about, he's a New Yorker. He's East Coast. He came from the magazine world. And he says, what happened to the magazine world is threatening to happen to TV and movies by extension. That it went from the quality pieces, and it wasn't just about going online, but the online revolution made a race to the bottom for quality and for payment. You know, where it gets to the point where you can't write online like the old. It didn't just go from dead tree media to digital media. There was a whole huge change in there to where new writers coming in are told, well, you know, write for free and it'll be good exposure. Well, you don't pay bills with good exposure. And the whole concept of journeyman writers, journeyman anybody, learning their craft, making mistakes, being mentored is completely blown up. To the fact that on the other extreme, some writers come in and they don't have the ability to be mentored in a room and climb that ladder because the ladder doesn't exist anymore. And it's not just that streaming shows only go 3 seasons of 10 episodes. Maybe that's the average. That's only 30 episodes. 3 seasons of 26 would be 3 times that. So this is beyond just comparing who's been in Star Trek makeup more than another actor. This is the real ripple effect of the 10-episode season, which in many ways has led to some amazing writing and moments and cinematic TV and all of these, you know, and the lowering of barriers between TV and movie. Those are all ripple effects for the good. But when you talk about the people who are making it and the people who are struggling to make it a craft and an art and not have the entire TV industry, much less TV and film, turned into a giant gig economy where everybody winds up being, for the 99% wind up being gig workers, being freelancers. In the old days where there were freelancers, but there was a structure and people at the top that you answered to and they cared about the quality of the show, not where it was one big massive gig factory and say Amazon or Netflix or the rest who are, you know, Disney now that they're in the streaming business, Paramount now that they're in the streaming business, are getting this. This Joe Keohane is talking about, he bemoans what happened to magazines, and he thinks it's all karmic that Vice and BuzzFeed, the disruptors who set off this stampede to the bottom, he's saying, are now failing too. He says same thing is happening in Hollywood. Confronted with the growth of digital disruptions, studios panicked and started flooding the market with content, driven by the naive and lunatic idea that as long as you're growing subscriptions, a viable business plan will reveal itself. So they lost a lot of money, saturated the market, overwhelmed the viewers, and put writers on a path to a situation where the only one who'll be able to afford to write for them are the people who don't actually need to write, who don't need to work. And now, he says, you've got Wall Street demanding these companies actually make money. Hello, bye-bye 6th season of Discovery. And don't talk about, oh, well, Discovery deserved it. It could have been any Star Trek that was in that place at that time. This is the retrenching of the industry, which is not just about, oh, well, it's the weather. This is human foibles and human decisions. Wall Street demanding that these companies start to make money. He says, because contrary to the ruinous Silicon Valley mentality, you can't butter your parsnips with growth. Okay. And instead of new ideas, the studios have responded with massive cuts. With the writer's strike, as with the magazines, the studio argument against compensating writers fairly is that if they do, they won't be able to keep doing the thing they've been doing, which also happens to not even remotely work. This is, I love this strain. And that's it. It's John Rogers' tweet says the new robber barons of Hollywood are on a suicide run. They'll extract as much wealth out of the system as they can before it crashes, and they'll beat up the workforce as much as they need to create savings to make Wall Street happy, to stretch out the run. He's saying this is what happened to Kmart, Toys R Us. This is airline stock buybacks. It's just gone from hard infrastructure and retail into information and entertainment. It's big picture stuff. Yeah. The companies are making between 28 and 30 billion in profit every year for the last 5 years, pandemic or not. Somewhere I saw a statistic about what all the Writers Guild demands. If we've paid everything to what they're asking for, what it would amount to, and it was a sliver of the profits. Here it is. WGA's proposals would have cost the companies $429 million a year. And he says, in other words, Ari Emanuel and David Zaslav, who are, well, David Zaslav is Discovery. Yeah, is Discovery CEO. Discovery NBC. Ari Emanuel is Endeavor, which I'm going back to remember. Those two alone, he says, could have paid all of that themselves and still walked away with $63 million each in salary. So that's it. And then just the path of these negotiations have been a little arrogant. The DGA put out their demands, the proposals, and 2/3 of them the producers wouldn't even negotiate over. So it's they're looking at streaming features, looking at you, Section 31 movie coming down the road, and all of this, just breaking down. They want to do away with weekly pay. The idea that you've got a weekly salary that's basing it on, and then your per script thing comes later, being invested in a room, that's blown up with the new streaming model, and it's gone away. But preserving the writer's room concept, getting rid of the mini room where you work and may not even get paid for what you do. And then there's sections here about foreign streaming where they've offered back on these things that have to do with money and pieces. But these structural elements that are making the old model extinct because the world has changed, and they haven't been paying for it. And that's why these profits are so huge. So, yeah. And then on top of that, this is a Star Trek thing. So that's what's going on. You can research, you can find. I'll post on Trekland some of these guys' threads, but you can find them. I mean, you can do hashtag. You can find several of our Star Trek folk out there in the forefront. Bill Wolkoff, who's on Strange New Worlds, I think number 2 in the room under Henry, and he's out tweeting constantly. You see everybody is in support, and yes, SAG and the DGA Directors Guild they're all in sympathy. What that also means is, and what happens, and what you're going to be seeing real quickly in different aspects of the media, is how the strike ripples effects right now. So what's affected immediately? Well, the live shows. So all your late, as if just not quite as it was in the pandemic, at least people could work from home. But those of you who remember 15 years ago, there's famous video of Conan twirling his wedding ring to take up time on the show. They would come on and just self monologue, not write anything, because even if the host was a member of the Writers Guild, they wouldn't be allowed to write something. So but they could come out and for a time spitball. And a lot of you remember that was 100 days. That was basically 3 months. But yeah, the live shows, which starts off being the nightly talk shows, you're going to see that immediately. Everybody's Dark tonight, and that'll go on. What's the scripted shows, the streaming shows, where are they now? We're in the spring. The seasons were wrapped. The old school model would have been everybody was wrapping up by now, and they would be not far from coming back working on the old fall debut shows. Well, that's blown up with the streaming shows. What's interesting is I was trying to take a inventory of how this affects us. I mean, let's think down the line. So Let me make sure I got to this. Yeah, you can follow folks and see what's going on. Now, at one point, I just had a great visit and lunch with Aaron Walke at Prodigy. As they wrap up their season 2, most people are home. It's just the core group getting it done at the end. And they're waiting on season 3. So hashtag give us a season 3 Prodigy. They are a step away. They have a different union, thanks to Walt Disney. The animation world, actors, writers, everything have all been diminished. Back in the day, they weren't in Walt Disney's time, thanks to Disney. Writers weren't they weren't writers. They were story people, like inkers on, they were just part of the cog. And so the entire animation world and industry, with a few exceptions, has been valiantly trying to jump that, to get back in the swing of things. And they have a separate union, which had been valiantly trying to make up the huge gap. They had negotiations last year. This is why, the signatories to the producers on that deal include Paramount and Nickelodeon. So you're not going to see this affecting Strange New Worlds and Prodigy because they're all in that line. And I wish I had this. It's it's the Animation Guild. It's TAG. So, but they're in support. They stand. They went through negotiations last year. They made up a fourth of the gap that separates them from the Writers Guild writers, and they're going to be working on that. That's their issue in the animation world. So, as far as Star Treks go, our 2 animated series are not going to see any kind of a slippage on the surface. But of our live actions, look what's happened. Discovery, they were adding and shooting extra footage to end the 5th season as the series finale. That's basically been done, I hear. So Picard is done. And as we hear from Terry all the time and everybody on that staff, no word about a green light. So what does that leave us? Strange New Worlds was actually, well, let me put it this way. For a year, you and your view screen, however you watch Star Trek, we've got Star Trek through the rest of the year that's already been produced or it's being wrapped up. So no, we're waiting on season 2 of Strange New Worlds. It was done last year. You're not going to be disrupted to see Strange New Worlds. That'll have nothing to do with what comes up June 15th, 16th. And then after that, Lower Decks and Prodigy have nothing to do with. And after that, what's happened? The 5th season of Discovery has now been promoted to a high pedestal. Its final year. It's been bumped into the spring. That won't be disrupted. So we're going to have hiatus gaps because we'll only be looking at 2 live action and 2 animated. What's supposed to fill the Section 31 movie is basically done. They're going to film it this fall when Michelle has they're prepping to shoot when Michelle has her available window. Whether that's set up as a backdoor pilot or what comes out of that, whatever happens, it'll be affected or not by this. But for right now, the movie itself, I'm hearing, is basically intact. So what does that leave us? Well, if Strange New Worlds is airing, that means they're pretty close to shooting. They're pretty close to gearing up for season 3 and going. And I'm thinking Strange New Worlds could be delayed. Now, we won't see it. And maybe there's time to depending on how long the strike is. If it's another 3-month strike, then yeah, we may have some more weeks. We may have more weeks in 2024 without Trek, or we may see the back end of Prodigy put forward to fill the time. I don't know. I'm totally guessing, but those are the things we're talking about. Impacts in 2024 at the earliest, just as far as an audience. And I say that because impacts, the other core thing way beyond Star Trek, the whole thing about this strike is, just as in 07 and 08, and I need to mention this, is that the dreaded ripple effects. A lot of people are going to be sacrificing. Now, people have been pointing out how, TV shows were affected. Arrested Development. Modern Housewives was affected. Lost was affected. The Office was a lot of shows. Some Heroes, they say, died because of the strike, could never recover and come back after that. Some shows just lost their mojo. So yeah, there were casualties that year, and some people, hopefully people went on to other projects, and the people that didn't, or that was the highlight of their professional career, they're probably always going to be bitter about that. But for the most part, what's animating folks is the sacrifice, and the sacrifice of writers and all the other guilds who are not going to cross their picket lines. So actors, so directors, so production shuts down. And when production shuts down, what does that mean? That means that now there's nobody, the crews. It trickles down to the Hollywood industries. Who's renting the furniture? Who's renting the greens? Who's catering the meals? Who's supplying makeup? Who's feeding that monster? All of those secondary systems are shut down as well. And there might be layoffs. It's rough coming back from pandemic and the inflation that's finally starting to calm down a little bit. It's a rough time. And that was all part of the factor in deciding whether to do this. But they know that those things, those last for a year or two. But these rates, when they're locked in, the writers and the rest of Hollywood, knowing that as go the writers, so go directors and actors. And that trickles, I hate to say trickles down, but that affects the crews, all the crews and designers that are part of IATSE. That will affect everybody. And ultimately, is our entertainment, the content, the thing that keeps us sane as consumers? This isn't a Hollywood elitist thing. For one thing, Hollywood is all over the country. This affects the folks shooting in New York and Atlanta and Vancouver. And yeah, it's Canadian, but it affects them. And Toronto. The UK writers have already said they're going to honor, they're not going to take any American jobs offered to them. They're not going to be scabs even from the UK. And that's out there. It's that ripple effect. And that is a consequence. And that is damning. That's something that gets taken into account on this. And part of this whole experience is, I can't believe it's been 15 years since then. But what I'm reading online, I'm seeing tweets, I'm seeing younger folks grappling with this. I'm seeing their mentors. I'm seeing younger, Gen Z consumers and audience people who love their stuff and might be a little pissed off if it's taken away. And a valiant effort being made by their peers and by everybody up and down the age spectrum to say, look, this is not just about your immediate gratification, if that's the way it strikes you. This is about, what are things going to be like going forward? Are you going to, just like Uncle Walt hamstrung an entire century, they're still recovering, as one example of that, how you get off in that, it's hard to make up the gaps when you're there. And if the entire entertainment world we've known for 100 years is gigified and gutted out the way people are bemoaning print journalism and magazines and newspapers, and go down the list of how many other industries, if that's gigified, just so it's all about profit and growth and satisfying Wall Street folk and showing money, and your upper dogs are sucking all the money out of the system that could go to everybody else being secure and happy and having a life. And that's not a competition. It shouldn't be a zero-sum game that only Hollywood gets to live this way. That's the way everybody should. And that's what's gone wrong with the economy. And boy, this got deep in a minute. But yeah, it's reflective. And one of the successes of the 2007 strike was educating the public to the reality of that. That, like, no, don't say you're jealous of us. You need to demand why you don't have that. And we're seeing, my God, the 15 minimum a wage, 15 hourly wage. We're seeing the Starbucks and some of the retail. The pandemic ripped the Band-Aid off of, oh yeah, how essential are they? Well, then you should pay them that much. We saw how an economy can grind to a halt. And don't even get me started about teachers and support people. The way the economy is in turn, and who's rewarded and who's not. So don't talk to me about Hollywood elitism. The pandemic was supposed to have exposed all this. And they did a great job in 2007 of saying, this is how we work. This has yielded what we've had for all these years. And there's actually more of a national ripple effect now than there was even then. As much as we bemoan the loss of, parochially, the jobs from LA and California going to other places, that's also kind of nationalized this, which I hadn't really thought about until just now. So yeah, depending on how big the market is, there's a ripple effect. Little pockets of this are going to be affecting, because it's not just about the writers, it's about the shutdown of productions. Again, starting with the lives, the filmed will be snaking out. In the old days, we would have been worried about the fall premieres, and you will be if you're still got your fall network, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox shows. That'll be there. The streamers are all over the map, all over the calendar. And again, as I said, in Star Trek world, we won't see a ripple effect until 2024. Strange New Worlds could be delayed. Starfleet Academy's whole development, they were supposed to shoot in the spring. That means development beforehand. If this strike goes on, that could be delayed. And if that could be delayed, we're waiting on Star Trek Legacy even longer. So that's kind of a blueprint here. That's kind of where we are. So it'll be interesting to see, what kind of pronouncements happen. But you're going to be hearing a lot of, and I hope you don't hear a lot of frou-frou. I'm going to say this, I don't categorize people, but the Gen Zers are pretty savvy when it comes to this. I don't know. If nothing else, go watch Bar Association on DS9. And here's the thing. Somebody I saw tweeting the other day said somebody was actually trying to knock the strike by citing Rom in the Bar Association, and said, yeah, but Rom wound up leaving after all and working for Starfleet. And someone came along and said, no, Rom came along and worked for the civilian Bajoran militia in waste extraction. He was not working for Starfleet, the people without money. And then, Nog went into Starfleet. But my point was, no, well, whatever. Rom did move on from Quarks. But all of those other workers at Quarks benefited by the work that Rom accomplished, by Rom's leadership and courage and sacrifice, and their joint sacrifice. They all benefited in the end, even after Rom left the bar as his main employee. So that's the thing. You've got all this, the future wave of writers, and how do you even break in the business, much less how do you survive once you get your foot in the door? And this line I've seen about people saying, Jesus, in another year or two of this, the only people who could afford to be writers are people who come from rich families. And that is not the skew you want permeating in an era of, more diversity in writing and representing all the voices. And that's still including half the population, women, much less all the people of color. I hate that term sometimes. It seems so boxy, but it's true. That's part of it. That's part of it. But some of these ripple effects, some of it just on the matters of fairness, people doing work and never seeing a dime of it, people investing their time and not be rewarding with it with a paycheck, or even rewarded their creativity by being allowed to continue working on the creativity. It's right now, the whole model has collapsed, and it's really skewed to those top dogs who may not even come from entertainment. This is a little bit what happened in the 70s when the old studio model fell apart, and the last, Jack Warner died, and Paramount went through its weird time and fell off the gate, and people were running studios who didn't know anything about movie making, and TV making was still a thing. And there was a disruptive, and that's when that's when the 60s rise of the independent movie came about, to deal with that stagnation and retrenching in Hollywood. Anyway, it's a fascinating time. But yeah, what's motivating the writers to go out and strike right now is they don't want to blow this up and subjugate generations of writers to come from this permanently, crippling their industry, hamstringing the craft and the art of their craft, which, is on display. I saw somebody else meme something that says, if you want to thank half of the internet the last 10 years have been the memes that have become touchstones as memes that are dialogue from shows and movies. And somebody said, because that was written by a human, not AI. And I haven't even mentioned AI. I almost forgot to mention AI. They want to start talking about not losing their jobs to a computer. And I don't blame the WGA doesn't want to be M5'd. And I believe that in a time when we're talking about that. People are also talking about the friend Dave Blass had a good tweet about the AI. And that's part of one of the things in the negotiating proposals. I'm trying to see. That's a line somewhere. It's about they want to study the impact. They don't want to have anything. They want protections against basically being replaced by computer writers, and the producers don't even want to talk about it. I'm trying to check this. Artificial intelligence. Regulate the use of artificial intelligence on MBA covered projects, partner projects. AI cannot write or rewrite literary material, cannot be used as source material, and MBA covered material cannot be used to train AI. And the studios countered with a rejection and saying they offered annual meetings to discuss advancements in technology, which is basically a nothing burger. So that's, as much as everything else is reacting to now, that's a ticking time bomb for the future. And I almost forgot to mention it. And another, as we're all sitting around, it's not so much about robots taking over. Robots taking over your job is bad enough. And the abuse of AI, and maybe it's not taking off your job. Maybe it just outcompetes you to where the whiz bang writer over here is really just a room full of AI bots. So yeah, a lot of issues. And what do you think? Are you up to snuff with this? I don't know how much I helped in my little way here today, but it's going to be front and center as the night shows go off, as we start hearing about a length and duration and what's going to affect the traditional calendar for fall, the shows not on traditional calendar, what the turnaround will be, if it's any faster than a fall premiere. But it's going to be in our face. And is the WGA East and West going to be able to explain their position and have the public behind them? It's not a hard and fast requirement, but it makes it easier. Sure as hell made it easy in 07, 08. Producers did not have a leg to stand on. Even though it dragged out for 3 months, the resolve was there. And things like the public events, things like the theme picketing, wasn't replacing boring, mundane, picket line walking. You look for your brothers and sisters to go with you, but you're not looking for glamour. But when they had the horror writers picketing, when the sci-fi writers picketed, when the Star Trek family and directors and actors all came to Paramount and picketed, when Bob and Alex came out and picketed, they took off their producer hats and came out and picketed, even to upgrade it. And you had 4 generations of Star Trek writers. It was an awesome day. It was an incredible day. If you can have that kind of outreach to the public and have them on your side, I think so. But the more this is talked about and discussed, it's just a matter of fairness. It's just another matter of what's wrong with chunks of the economy being hollowed out and wreckage being left, where it was a perfectly fine, functioning industry. And as we're looking at things that happened 20 and 30 years ago and trying to fix them now with new eyes, as a new generation hopefully ascends to power and goes, what the fuck did you people do 20 years ago just in the name of extreme profit? You can talk about the morality of that, but the real world result is small towns left to rust, people not being able to have a living wage, increasing generations not being able to live the way their parents did. And it's a sliver of the population, but the Writers Guild and all the ripple effect unions and guilds and the sidebar industries and the economic effect that has, and not just in LA now, in New York, all of that, well, the foundation is the same as in 07. The issues are different. The issues may even be scarier, because the '07 was about keeping up. This is about wrecking the entertainment world that we've known for 40, 50 years. So we will see what's going on. Okay. I'm going to get back into the chat here in just a second. What do you think? Are we going to have a spicy one here? I've got an hour. Hey, if you are watching us later on YouTube, just know that you could have joined us here live. We're about to hit the chat here in a minute. But before I do that, I want to just remind everybody, thanks for joining in. And before we hit that chat, I want to thank everybody in the TTLers. This is my Patreon. So thank you. Diana Hopkins, Lawrence Todd, Justin Porteous, Chris Jiggins, Robin Wilson, Anne-Marie Siegel, Glinda Bruton, Pranakasha Productions, and Andrew Jasimski. And our live wires, Robin McLean, Byron Bailey, J.R. Poole, Halbeard Gunn Johnson, Alan Hohensey, Dave Gregory, Tobias Rex, Donna Runyon, and Casey Shafsky. Thanks so much. It's a new month, so it comes out at the end of the month. But you too can join up. Patreon does that. It's $5. It's $10 for a shout out. The $10 folks get access to a ton of our original backstage Trek interviews and conversations, and a lot of personal pictures from the first 2 or 3 years of Portal 47, the early years. So glad to have you along with that. As it becomes summertime, and maybe you're missing entertainment, you can make your own entertainment with your own custom away mission. Come out to LA, work with me up front at treklandtreks.com. We'll set up a day where I host you, pick you up hotel to hotel, and we visit 4 of the sites you pick out with my help, and we'll have a lunch along the way. I'll help you with your cosplay, whatever you want to do. It's your own away mission in real life, out and about. Treklandtreks.com. It's coming up this summer season. And hey, look who's back on the Trek Files today. It dropped as it always does, early Tuesday. The great John Eves. Speaking of the Art Directors Guild, Life Achievement Award winner for Trek and so much more. We claim him in Trekland. He's just an awesome guy, and he's back talking about updating the looks of Trek back in the past and for today. You don't want to miss it. This week's Trek Files at the Trek File. The documents, the DC Fontana memo that sparked this is right there at facebook.com/the Trek Files. But, podcast.roddenberry.com is where you can see all the Roddenberry podcasts too. And as I leave you later, just a reminder, you can find me on Twitter, where I'll be retweeting a lot of folks that I'm following about the strike progress and seeing what people are saying privately as well as publicly. That's at Larry Nemechek. And hey, if you haven't already, like and subscribe us on YouTube. We're growing finally. Thanks so much for that. We're like the animation writers. We have miles to go to catch up, but we're going to get there. No, I'm not comparing myself to their economic situation, merely the mathematical curve. Support the animation folks and the animation voice folks when it comes time for their struggle too, okay? It's Larry Nemechek's Trekland, though, on Instagram, which is a lot of fun, and Facebook, and YouTube. Portal47.net, take a look. Jump in with us. It's like a mini-con all year long. For the folks who had no idea how much Star Trek they had no idea about. And yeah, this has been a deep dive into the business end of things. It's going to ripple out to Star Trek. We love to talk about the history. I love to talk about the romance of that day and the fun of that day. But it was in 07 at the Star Trek theme strike. But it was about very serious issues. And fortunately, at that time, they were able to hang together and show a unified force. So that's it, gang. And if you are leaving us right now, later, again, try to watch us live if you get a second. But thanks for watching in any case. Hey, stay well. Do all the things. Stay woke. Check your sources. And Trek well, everybody. Oh, thank goodness. Okay. Real quick. So the Parrot Analytics, the streaming, speaking of the way things have evolved and changed and disrupted, Parrot Analytics has not updated their generic ratings, their rankings using their average demand expressions algorithm scouring the internet and whatever hard numbers they can find to talk about movies everywhere in the world, many markets, not just the US, but of the US numbers weekly. They've not updated. Now, they've been selling their recent numbers to a site called TV Geek, apparently licensing them so that TV Geek gets these numbers. And you know what? I checked there for Picard in the US. It's obviously going to be off the hot peak. The episodes are all out. The peak of talking about Picard is naturally going to slow off. It happens with everything. It's just Picard was the hugest one ever. So yeah, the trend is downline. It's down a third. The peak demand this week was at 30, was at 53 and 68, but the peak was at 53 times more popular than an average show, which is still pretty good. It's still in that, I'm still imagining it's up in the top 10. They're not showing the rank here. What I will say is, they're saying 32, but it's higher than that. But it is still showing that it's a higher trending than 96%, 99.3% of all other genre action adventure series. So Picard's not going anywhere. Just at the same token, I looked early at Strange New Worlds on TV Geek for the latest numbers. Well, their trend is up 9/10. It's upticking. We're not really into the rollout of the promo and everybody talking about Strange New. It's sitting at 23, which is nothing. That's probably in the second 20. It's trailing off. What was interesting, though, this Flix Patrol site, which looks at the streaming channels, and the fact that Amazon Prime not only carries Picard around the world, but it's also an ancillary channel in the US. But worldwide, as of today, which is measuring yesterday, so as of May 1st, Picard was still the number 6 series on Amazon Prime in the world. So go figure that down. It's actually up 4% from the day before. But no, it's Citadel is hot and new there. If you want to just look at theirs, Lord of the Rings is half of that. And then The Power, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is still fresh. Not everybody's seen it, including moi. Dead Ringers. And then there's, a drop down to Picard. And then Jack Ryan and on down. So Picard's not going anywhere. It's always going to be known as a hot show. I haven't looked to see what the Nielsen's streaming ratings, wherever those turn out to be, is looking like. So that's, and we wait and wait and wait in Casablanca. No, we're waiting on Strange New Worlds. Again, won't be affected by any of this, as will the 2 animated series to come, and as will Discovery in the spring in 2024. Depending on how the strike lasts, and I've seen people think it may be settled fast, or this may be the battle of all mothers because it's really about a transitional soul. And are these barons, the robber barons of media, this one guy's calling them. I'll call them out. So Ari Emanuel of Endeavor, David Zaslav of Discovery, Bob Iger at Disney. Not making near as much as the others. These top 2, 308 million a year, 246 change a year. Then down to Bob Iger, 45.9, and this is their basic salary. We're not talking about whatever add-ons they got. The Disney EC, and then Bob Chapek is the Disney CEO. Rupert at Fox, 31 million. Reed Hastings at Netflix, the co-CEO at Netflix, and Ted Sarandos, they make 40 and 38. And then Brian Roberts at Comcast, CEO, 30 million. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. Let's get into the chat, gang. And I can go, till the top of the hour, almost. So let's see. What did I stir up? Did I educate? Did I get something wrong? I'll do the Rachel Maddow line. If I got something wrong, we'll see. But we are, I agreed, Alan. Hello? There. May the strike be short. There's no law that says it has to go 3 months. It's all going to be in. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while for the effect, and we'll see. We will see. My optimistic Star Trek writer person, when I said last night, well, misplaced optimism, the reaction was ugh. So, let's see. Hello, Henry X. I think you're new to us and over on YouTube. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. This may be your first time with us, but there we go. Yes, that strike between first and second season, Maury Hurley scrambling around trying to do what he could. They pulled, I think I've talked about this before, or maybe it's in the companion, but they were looking at the stories they'd bought for phase 2 that they'd already paid for to see if anything could be reworked easily, which technically Maury would have been a WGA member, and if he was working on rewriting it, it technically would have been a thing. He was probably just trying to hedge when the strike was over, catching up, I believe is where that fell. So I'm not sentencing Maury Hurley in absentia here, RIP. Yes, I answered this, Henry. Someone was saying that animation doesn't follow the same contracts. Maybe Trek animated shows won't be as affected. And I got into that. Yes. Here's the thing. Animation shouldn't be treated differently. They should all be at the same minimums, at least. You know, people can negotiate. When you get clout as you climb that ladder, same thing with directors, same thing with actors. There are minimums to protect the entry-level folks, actors, writers, journeyman, anything. There are minimums. Once you have the clout, you can negotiate a contract above the minimum. But that's why we famously say when they're putting together Encounter at Farpoint, D came in and did his Admiral McCoy scene at minimum, not his contract rate, not his movie rate. He did that at minimum as a favor to Gene and to the fandom. So occasionally you will see people say actor so-and-so or writer or director so-and-so came in and worked at minimum scale to help a friend out or to help a cause out. This is exactly what it means. Everyone has to scramble a lot more to stay employed. You're really gigging the writer's world. You're really making them freelance. It's like, would you want if I say your doctor or your lawyer to freelance, well, they do freelance, but they have a practice. They have a built-up clientele. Anyway, thank you, Dean. That's very kind of you. Sweet of you. Dean's talking about that crazy Will Rogers board. They made me president after just 2 years and yet 20 years. It's pretty much what I'm hearing, Christoph, is Section 31 is pretty much done and ready to go. Yeah. Paris is burning. We'll always have Paris. Is that what it was? Yeah. Rico, did you sneak in here? Did I miss seeing you? Okay. Oh, there you go. See, there you go, everybody. WGA strong, because actors and directors know that whatever the new structure or the evolved structure is for the writers, that's what they'll be stuck with too. And it's been hurting everybody the same way. The old residuals formula is just totally blown up for 3/4 of the working entertainment world, or maybe more. The old way that you made a safety net, especially in a world where everything is rerun constantly. I feel sorry for the old 50s and 60s and 70s. They just count on people dying off and their heirs not caring. But when you see shows from the 50s and 60s just out on YouTube, where people somebody hadn't retained the rights to it. I mean, it's fine, it's great if it's like a show that two people entire globe care about. But there we go. Thank you for popping in, Rico, if you're still here with us by the time I get to say that. It has been quite a week, hasn't it, Donnie? Yeah. Harry Belafonte, Jerry Springer, and Gordon Lightfoot. I was kidding with somebody. We were reading something and I realized, well, the assistant script coordinator and I were talking last night about Gordon Lightfoot. And I was like, well, okay, there's Sundown and Edmund Fitzgerald and what else? And I started remembering and reading all his other shows. And I'm like, Carefree Highway, what is that? I went, you mean it's not Every Highway? Every highway lets me slip away. I had no idea. It was Carefree Highway. Okay. I said that on Twitter. And at least one other person said, I always thought it was Every Highway too. Of course, it's poetic. EV apostrophe RY. But yes, great long lives, great career work. There we go. Yeah. Oh, thank you, May. And just to be clear, it's not as a park employee. It's a nonprofit board, people volunteering their time. And the pandemic, and yeah, it's been around since 2006. All the great upheaval at the park. Long story. I could tell you that history sometime too. Yeah. Let's see. The Section 31 movie hasn't been written. It could always be a clip show. No clip shows, but no need. That poor thing has been in, prep and production and the pilot. Oh, now the pilot's going to be, I don't know if it's strictly that, but that could be a core part of it. Like, like Hans Zarkov said, now is the time to strike. Flash. Ah. Okay. Let's see. A 20-hour work week, if paid as a 40-hour work week, would be quite amazing. Yeah. No, I had not seen this. I've been kind of busy, but there you go. Ira talks about how the whole pitching model has changed. And there you go. I'm going to do that now. Good to see everybody. Got more folk coming in. Well, hyper stock driven and hyper growth driven. Of course you want to grow. Everybody wants to grow. People don't want to go the other opposite end. But when this whole thing on quarterly, this emphasis on, instead of the overall, what's the overall trend? The hyper focus, the Gordon Gekko since the 80s look here. Yeah. Good deal, May. Now, my thing is, you and everybody else has to take this and support and retweet. And whether you see your Star Trek writers and the supporting actors and directors, or whether you see everybody across the board. Yeah. Well, you're not the only one fearing that. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Di. Entry-level artists, now entry-level journalists, entry-level a lot of folks. Oh, we'll take advantage. Like my friend Aaron Harvey got into with some of his wonderful graphics. And a lot of you know Aaron. A few years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, the dawn of Discovery Days, 17, 18, 2017, 27, 18. Winding up with that kind of promo thought. But yet, his get your foot in the door promo art was so good that it instantly started turning up on, Chinese knockoffs. It's like, well, wait a minute. if it's good enough to be knocked off by the Chinese, how do I get ripped off twice? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Feed ChatGPT with proposals as the main writer. Hire not in Uden students as proofreaders against the worst AI accidents. Done. Yeah. Writers and artists on multiple fronts in media are given short shrift over and over again. It's hard enough for them to get respectful conversation. Yes. And this whole, again, if nothing else coming out of the pandemic, how did people keep their sanity? And if not by fresh content, it was, for a while, it was the vast storehouse of archived. Again, I like that. I wish I'd kept it. The meme said, the guy that said, the internet for 15 years, half of the internet has been memes with whether they were funny or powerful. The lines that kept you and captured you going. And maybe this whole entertainment thing isn't, it's not an expendable bauble that we play with in our spare time. Entertainment means a lot to folks. And I'm not just talking about Star Trek people who model their lives on, their sanity around it. I'm talking about everybody. But we can start with Star Trek as a life model. But everybody, we've got to unwind. We've got to do that. And not all of us have the luxury of having people to play bridge with or Risk or sit down and game with. And, Zoom has been great for gaming, role play and otherwise, MMMG or otherwise. But there we go too. Oh, okay. And thank you, John. I didn't get back to this. John's over here on text. And just I didn't mention this because I forget that I have to say this, but this is true. Even if scripts are done, the writers can't be on set for rewrites. And I'm stuck here with the old Rick Berman model where the writers wouldn't be on set anyway, but they'd all be back in their offices and churning out the blue and the pink and the yellow and the buff and the salmon and the green tint through the color wheel. They're not changing out churning all that out, much less the fact that the actors and directors are in sympathy strikes anyway. So, John says the Bond movie Quantum of Solace basically spun out due to the on-set rewrites being done by Daniel Craig. Yeah. Well, okay, you're saying AI is a red herring now? Then I would that's not even at that level. Okay, John, that would be wonderful. But in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, if it's a red herring, then why not talk about it now? That said, the studios will think that it's magic and will try to mandate in the process of screening and reviewing what writers to produce them. Right. John says there should absolutely be a clip show for Lower Decks. I should just do this. I should immortalize this because it's too good. There should absolutely be a clip show for Lower Decks where they're essentially watching an episode of Lower Decks. That's funny. Now I got to catch up with where we were. And even if you sound like Karl Marx, the companies would not make money if there would not be writers, actors, and contributors. The people should be paid more. Yeah, the people should be, if they're going to change the model, they have to adapt the payment structure to the model. That's what we're saying, the payment and the reward structure. Right. Well, Lynn, is that what happened? I know they're not, and they haven't been part of it for a while. I thought they moved on to another project because of the delays. Is that what's happening? Hi, Lynn. Is this your first time with us? But that's interesting. Oh, yes. Mika Burton is following in the footsteps of every other actor and cast person, not to mention her dad, for the strike in 07 and 08. And in 07 and 08, we were just starting socials, but they were there. 1907, 2007, I think, was Facebook. And I think my Twitter started in 09. So this is even before Twitter. So Facebook was starting to handle the mantle of that. So yes, May. The strike started at midnight, 12:01 a.m. today, May 2nd. The contract ran out May 1st. They didn't, sometimes, if they're negotiating in good faith on both sides and they just need a little more time, sometimes they'll mutually agree to extend the deadline. That didn't happen because there was no earnest negotiating happening. They met yesterday, but it was, So it's like, bring it on. Now it's going to take a while for that to kind of kick in and have an effect. But yes, writers and supporting folks are on the picket lines as we speak. Picketing started this afternoon, Tuesday, May 2nd. Absolutely. And if you check your socials, there will already be flooding folks with, I hadn't had time to check in the last couple hours, but they were starting to line up. You started seeing the pictures of all the picket signs lined up. And yes, it's a new graphic from 07. I kept my 07 picket sign for a long time until we moved. And then I thought, okay, this is silly. But I took pictures of it. And there's pictures of us in the day. And yesterday we were covering the strike at Paramount. I did walk the line because, by God, I was a WGA boom. We had to join the union when we sold Prophecy. It's one of those, catch 22 things. You have to be in the union to sell the thing, but you have to. And we were associated members. I think that lasted for 3 years until you sell more. But Janet and I and Andre Bermanis all went down to the same little seminar when you go in and they give you this and you listen and you sign your forms and everything. So yes, I'll do a social with this at some point in support. But yeah, very much so. Very much so. They're going now. Oh yes. Yeah, Linda, that's the least. Reruns and new content, no new content. That's the least we can get. Let's hope the strike is. Let's hope that, say, in Trek world, we've got new content. I hate that word. We've got new applesauce. Content is just another way of blandifying everything. Oh, it's content. I'm just going to churn it out because I'm going to stamp it on I'm going to be Lucy and Ethel and wrap up the little, but no new episodes until next spring. Now, if the strike settles in a week, a month, 2 months, maybe there's enough give time in there to get back on track. So we can hope that. But yeah, there'll be aspects. And as John threw in here, the soap operas are the other big loss immediately, along with, say, the late night talk shows and anything else that's done live. Oh, thank you, Henry. Henry, you're sounding rather industry focused. The upfronts are in 2 weeks. That will be interesting. We'll see what's happening. There'll be a lot of, what is a picket line? A picket line is people protesting. They're striking. They're on strike, a labor action. Yeah. There you go. 0.01 hours. Actually, yes. Dancing with the Stars is leaving the network and becoming a Disney Plus exclusive. There you go. Well, how many years has it been on? What's his name? One of the founders, dancer and judge, died. Len. Just yes. There you go. Speaking of ABC, Donnie, you say it's picking up 911 for season 7 after 6 seasons on the Fox network, which itself renewed the show's Lone Star spinoff for season 5. Is Lone Star a spinoff of the movie? I saw that the other. I hadn't even heard about it. We love the John Sayles movie. Actually, Janet loves it, and now I love it too. It's amazing. I kept meaning to check out if that was a spinoff of the movie, because the movie's from the late 90s. And it's so prescient. I love it when they're talking about what the mix of the Black, Hispanic, and white kids in South Texas. They're fighting over their textbooks and teaching history. And that's just one of the threads. Mm-hmm. Well, you and whose army, Donnie? Oh, I guess everybody's army. Duralta? I don't know off the top of my head. I'm not a WGA strike historian. It was one of the longest. The 100 days was one of the longest. No, there's never been a strike for a year. That would have shut down. That would have left a big crater in Hollywood. Unless you want to call something like the blacklisting of the Hollywood 10 or so, 10 people that didn't work for 15 years, entirely different reasons during the McCarthy era. There you go. Okay, Jared. Positive thing. Well, the most positive thing that came out of the 07-08 strike was they didn't dumb down the industry, and everybody didn't lose their creative power to survive. But yeah. Okay, I'm just saying. I never watched it either. I only knew that George was on it, and that's where we got our first new Spock, Zach Quinto. Yep. Strange New Worlds is going to be on Pluto. You can watch it with commercials. I'll be curious to see how that works, unless it's totally app and not on the linear side. I'm trying to even remember how Pluto is. Is Pluto linear only, or is it streaming with commercials? Don't do it. You'll never get hired if they buy your script as a scab. Don't do it. So, Donnie, are you in Texas? Speaking of CBX and Pluto TV, I'm watching CBS News Texas at 4 and 5 p.m. on the ladder streamer CBS News Texas channel. Yeah. There you go. Oh, there you go. Linda, happy Teacher's Day. Yes, happy Teacher's Day. So many of my cousins are teachers. My big sister is a teacher, and my nieces, two of my oldest two nieces are teachers. And I very would have come this close to being a teacher myself if I hadn't gone into the high power paying world of local newspapers. Yeah. This is true. So many magazines are just overpriced photo essays these days. Where's my Starlog magazine? Well, even if it was on, having to find a business model that still, look, as somebody who was both a writer and an editor in magazines, whether it was Starlog or whether it was for Dan at the Communicator, it was, you counted on people doing that writing out of a labor of love, and then you tried to make up for it. And Ian Spelling could tell you this. You tried to make of it by bulk. That's all you could do, because you were paying people like $100, $120, 130, 50 a piece for 1,000 words, 1,500 words. And that's in the day when, your AI, oh God. I love talking to people. I love putting the story together. It was the transcribing your tape that drove me crazy. And unlike news reporting, where you would take down notes from a meeting or a live interview or conference, you knew your Star Trek writing was going to live forever. So you had to have the words right, because you didn't want somebody to say you'd misquoted them or even misfacted them. It's not like a scandal misquote. It's we got the wrong factoid wrong for 30 years. You don't believe me? Talk about the typo in the making of Star Trek in the warp field scale, the warp factor scale. Typos live forever. But yeah, Henry X. There's still the New Yorker. There's still the Atlantic. There's still a few out there, and they're online models. Well, Deralta, I'm glad you would never want to be a Streikbrecher. Is that what we're doing? Yeah, amazing how simple it really all is. And you know what? They were paid until the world changed. So pay them according to what makes sense in the new world that they have wrought, right? Well, Travis, I feel like I'm not being very comprehensive. I feel like I'm just kind of, you know, and I'm hardly the expert on the issues. I've just tried to grab a few people's smart comments here and do a little research. And then maybe apply it to our Star Trek prism. Yeah. Well, like I said, the thing that's happening now versus before the 0708s, and now I'm thinking it was the baby days of this, but you've got social media. Now you've got the other side of the coin, which is the chance for bots and trolls to be out there trolling. But aside from people who are just trying to sow social discord, who's going to be on the side of the big bad media barons, especially the big two there that were sucking up 200 plus million a year in salary? Yeah. Yeah. Paramount in the Gulf and Western days. Talking about the 80s. Yep. Yep. Oh, Henry X, you have to give up a little anonymity here. You're sounding like the wizened person in the know here. Don't know about this next generation breaking in or heading west. There is no script magazine on a Borders newsstand encouraging them anymore, or something to that effect. Well, they can still sit at home and watch what they enjoy and dream. I mean, there's so many of the new writers already online that I've not had a chance to meet. Oh. And I'm going to get his name wrong if I don't look it up. But let's see if I can find it. If you look at the names, pre-research, look at the names, and now you can follow their socials, follow their Twitter and Instagram. And let me see. Yeah. Matt Okamura tweeted at one point. Yeah, the socials are full of folks picketing now. Pay your writers or we'll spoil Succession. Matt Okamura at one point, who was a writer on Picard, and good luck to him going forward. Interior Chinatown on Hulu is also in his Twitter feed here, and he worked on Leverage on Amazon. He talked about in 2019, he was at Comic-Con wanting to break in as a writer and went to the Picard store, the setup, museum setup, the season 1 Picard, when it was all about the family crest and the wine cases. It was the season 1 pop-up event that went from Comic-Con to Vegas to New York and was probably on the cruise, and how he didn't have enough money to buy anything in the gift shop, or he bought a pen because that's all he could afford in the gift shop. And today he's writing on the series. And I was just like, wow, that was a great little story. Again, that's the kind of story you can pick up in socials. And yes, this is something I'm paying attention to too. The Otoy videos. I would have talked about them this week, but I wanted to get into the strike. But I've got this on my radar and may have somebody to talk with about it. Those are amazing videos. People are blown over by them. And yeah, comedy. The next battle will be actors versus AI, which of course has been brewing for decades. Yes, absolutely. Ever since the youthening and all of that stuff started to happen. As somebody who is working with Chat GPT daily now, that is an industry that needs to be worried. Well, what is the industry that needs to be worried, Jared? Hi, Wanda MV. I think you've been with us before on Tuesdays, but who's glad you're here. And what are you saying? Thank you for thorough history and the background, the struggles of Hollywood writers. I'm hoping they're successful negotiating a good and fair contract. Me too. And I hope it happens sooner than later. And no, that was not a football nor history reference. A friend sent me a season script, actually two, developed by his AI. This disturbs me immensely. Imagine pulling up to the drive-thru and the person taking your order is Alexa powered by ChatGPT. Did you all see the episode of the late X-Files where it was an AI nightmare? Yeah. They're eating at a Chinese, Fox and Mulder and Scully are eating at an Asian restaurant. And it's weird because there had been no people the whole time, and the food's delivered to them on a conveyor, and they don't tip because there are no humans. And basically the AI increasingly attacks them and then churns into the greater network, and they can't even leave and go home without the world at large. I don't want to spoil it, but it's incredible. It is incredible. Yes. So there you go. The nightmare scenario. Okay. Jared. Oh, you're longer than the bubble. So you went to see Cirque du Soleil in Colombia. You were shocked to see people freely recording with their phones. When you ask about it, the Cirque person said that they let them do it because they had no recourse to stop people from doing it there. Hi, Rose. Glad you're coming into us from the UK. Yay, 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 yay. And hey, Jerry. Jerry from Michigan. Good to see you too. Let you guys heck up. Maybe an AI wrote now, Picard season 1 and 2 might explain a few things. Okay, Christoph, we'll apologize in advance. Thank you for the parrot needle. Needle for parrots. Thank you both. Okay. Oh, I did not hear this. Speaking of parrots, Michael Palin's wife, Helen, has passed away after 57 years of marriage. Okay. Well, R.I.P. Helen Palin. Yes, absolutely. Hi, Sophia. You just got here. Well, thankfully, the next is arriving in June, and the writer's strike won't affect the next year or so of rollout. Yes, Comcast, home of Xfinity and NBC Universal. Yes. Okay. Okay, so Paramount Plus is in Portugal. Okay. There we go. As for filling the Trek gap, the Center Seat DVD has been released April 25th, not in the GSA in particular as a thought, but in general, it seems. English only, it seems. Okay. It's time for another unboxing. And this time, this is something a little personal. Oh, I didn't, let me put it back in and take it out. This is a little personal. Speak of the devil, it is the Center Seat. Yes, it's all 11-hour episodes. It is a fourth disc of the uncut interviews with Leonard Nimoy, Nichelle Nichols, and Kirstie Alley. So all folks that we have lost, the Leonard Nimoy interview is from years ago. I think it's the last one he did. But Nichelle and Kirstie's were further back, and Nichelle's is not quite so recent, but the Kirstie one was done for the project, I believe. Anyway, it's the intact. It's, what is it? 3.5 hours of not seen on TV content. which basically are those 3 interviews. So like an hour plus interview with Kirsty, Leonard, and Nichelle, and especially Kirsty's is going to be rare. Anyway, there you go. The thing is, it's, see, I haven't even opened it. DVD only, so no Blu-ray. It's Nacelle Company. It's a startup on spin-offs like this. Maybe they'll invest in Blu-rays. I don't know. That's disappointing. But otherwise, it is 4 discs. And there you've got your bonus interview, folk. It's out there. An unauthorized and unfiltered 11-episode documentary series. And it's the series that Pete Holmstrom didn't watch before he wrote his coffee table companion to it, which is still amazing to me. Just that uphill battle. Anyway, there's the Nacelle Company logo. Yeah. So if you didn't get to see it, it's on Amazon Prime in the US anyway. So you can find, if you couldn't see the back end because it was paid, if you couldn't see the front end because they went away from free History Channel so fast, you can see all 11 episodes on Amazon Prime in the US at least. And the DVDs are now out. So it's worth a watch. And if you're a documentarian, it's good to have that. Gates did a fantastic job of her narration. The writers, who I don't think are credited, did a great job writing a very pithy narrative that she handled very adroitly. Good stuff. Make sure and get it. Okay. And yes, Christoph, good way to help fill. One thing you can do to fill your Trek gap. Oh, Dave, I think I sang. Throwback to the old life support live drinking game. Yep. Yes, Sophia, we mentioned this. I'm going to get back to the Otoy videos. Yeah, the crashed Enterprise, the Spock there. Talk about threading together. Lots of threads to tie up together. You start off with a Generations vibe, and then you wind up with a Kirk Spock Star Trek 3 vibe. Carefree Highway, what's that? Oh, well, okay. Don't let me leave you too drunken here. Melanie, you're just waiting for the robots to take over. Gang, I don't think I'm going to get, I'm looking, madly looking for our, for my chat arrow here. Where is it? I may be calling this off a little early today. I got 10 minutes here. How long can, yeah, outside Star Trek. Hey, 5150 Rockstar. Oh, really? Well, 51, glad to have you with us. You're definitely new to Tuesdays here. Glad you made it. And Pat B, hello. I think you're new to Tuesdays as well, unless you are changing over. Glad to, this is incredible. This is great. Moo, I knew you've been with us. Exactly. Or just up and down. Can we just have good years and bad years? It's got to be onward and ever. That's the way to implosion. That's the way to the last survivors eat each other. Yes. And I wanted to thank you for your comment on the side there, John. That was don't think I'd see those. And sci fiction. Hello. Boy, we're getting lots of new folk over here. That's a good sign. Thank you. Facebook's closed captioning interpreted my comments on Lower Decks as lower dicks. I hated. I never liked Beavis. I guess I was too old in the 90s for it. I don't know. I just always thought Beavis and Butthead was a celebration of dumbing down everything. But I obviously had tons of fans who are now 20 and 30 years older than they were when they enjoyed it the first time. Okay. There you go. Yep. He says, "Don't think he doesn't see those, Christoph." And I'm sure that that's the first time he's ever got the Skynet joke. Right. No, it's filmed content. So no, a lot of writers on strike wrote magazine articles, wrote books. They moonlit the same way a lot of the actors during the pandemic. No, during the strike. Yeah, people. Wow, is it that old? Is Joss Whedon's Much Ado About Nothing that old? Am I thinking? No. It's a long story, Duralta. There's a million places where I've talked about it, but Andre wasn't part of the writing process. I just mentioned that, see, Andre had sold his first script too. So there's they used to have a monthly thing where you went in and did your, now you could probably just do it on Zoom, but you picked up your deal, you filled out paperwork, somebody told you all the rules and regulations and protocol and procedures and protections and what to do next and all of that. And no, Andre made his first sale at the same time we made our first sale in that window in late 94. Andre, who'd been science advisor for a while. And now I am sure Dr. Aaron is in the same boat and wanting to follow the same path. You and your Terminator jokes, guys. Okay. I'm going to have to wrap it up here pretty quickly today. Exactly, Duralta. How many authors, writers, could one pay enough to live a carefree life with a salary as Zaslav or a Bob Iger? Exactly, yes. Sci-fi BSG writer of the writer's strike. Yeah, you're going to be seeing that everywhere, Glenn. All the writers that you know and follow, the TV and movie writers, are all going to I stand with the WGA, writers strike support. I should do that myself. As soon as I get a moment, I'm going to do it myself. Today is not that day. Rewatching Farscape and the subtitles confuse droids with druids. There you go. Yeah. Troy, hi, Troy. I think you've been with us before, but if not, welcome, and amen to that. No one enjoys strike porn. Well, related to the strike, I mean, anyway. Yes. Tip your AI. You saw that. Yep. Okay. Hey, Tumor Boy. Ahoy. I don't think the writer's strike is affecting you all. Are you in the games and animations thing? I don't know. I can see I'm going to have to, we got the drum roll in. Yay. And there's problematic bits with Center Seat, but for the most part, if nothing else, not sure. Could be, Jerry, could be. Yes. Into the chat as we know it. Gang, I'm going to, thank you all for helping out. I'm going to say thanks once again. Remember the Center Seat video. I'm not making anything on this. I just want to make sure folks see it. And hey, once again, a huge thank you to our TTLers. Thank you all so much. If anybody else wants to jump in on that, don't forget it's patreon.com/the Trek Files. It's $5 and $10 a month. That's all. I keep it simple. There's simple perks, but I very much appreciate it. We are gradually, slowly expanding what we can do with everything streaming and live and our social video. If you can get yourself to LA, business or vacation, let's set up a day tour or maybe two. We'll go to 4 places you pick out. I'll work with you. We'll coordinate. I'll support you. I'll drive you and host you, give you all the factoids you want to know, and let you play. It's your own custom, unique thing. TreklandTreks.com, of course. And again, the Trek Files. John Eves is our guest talking about what happens when a writer wants to redesign some tech. What does the artist do? Well, we talk about that. And we have a Dorothy Fontana memo from 1986 on the Trek Files there at Facebook or wherever fine podcasts are caught. Boom, that's going to do it for me. Larry Nemechek on Twitter and Mastodon. Hey, Larry Nemechek, Trekland on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell and all the silly things. Really appreciate it. We're starting to finally gain subscribers and traction, and it's thank you all for who are new here today. Same thing on Facebook, same thing on Instagram, portal47.net for your mini-con all year long, no matter where your center seat is. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to be watching. Again, I encourage you to support the writers, but follow all of them on your socials, and you'll know the vibe. You'll get a lot of good insight, and you'll probably get a lot of cool pictures too. And as happened before, a lot of cool reunions that no one's expecting to see. They get out of their rooms, they get out of their pandemic rooms, much less their writer rooms, and get together. So that's going to do it, folks. Stay healthy, do all the things, stay woke. And here's another example of what you need, what I'm talking about. And Trek well, everybody.